Jake Miller sat on his bed staring at his math homework. The numbers seemed to dance around on the page. He was 16 and hated algebra more than anything else in the world. The afternoon sun came through his bedroom window, making everything look golden and warm. A small stone hit his window. Then another one. Jake looked outside and saw Amy Carter standing in her backyard next door. She was waving at him with a big smile on her face. Amy was 15, 1 year younger than Jake, but she acted like she was older most of the time. They had been best friends since they were little kids. Jake opened his window. "What do you want?" He called down to her. "Come on, let's do something fun," Amy shouted back. "It's Friday afternoon. We don't have to think about school until Monday." Jake looked at his homework again. The math problems could wait. He closed his book and went downstairs. His mother was in her home office, typing on her computer. She worked as a scientist for some government project. Jake never really understood what she did, but it had something to do with time and physics. "I'm going to hang out with Amy," Jake told his mother. Dr. Lisa Miller looked up from her computer. She had been working on something important for months now. Her eyes looked tired and she had dark circles under them. "That's fine, honey. Just be careful. And don't go down to the basement. I'm running some tests down there." Jake nodded. His mother's basement lab was off limits to everyone. Even his father Danny wasn't allowed down there. The basement had been making strange humming sounds for weeks now. Sometimes the lights in the house would flicker when his mother was working down there. Amy was already at the front door when Jake opened it. She bounced on her feet like she always did when she was excited about something. Her brown hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she wore her favorite blue jeans and a red t-shirt. "Finally," she said. "I thought you were going to study all day. What do you want to do?" Jake asked. Amy grinned. "I don't know. Maybe we could watch a movie or play video games. Or we could just talk. I heard something interesting at school today." They went up to Jake's room. Amy threw herself down on his bed and looked around. She had been in this room hundreds of times, but she always found something new to look at. Today she noticed that Jake had gotten a new poster of a spaceship on his wall. "That's cool," she said, pointing at the poster. "Do you really think humans will travel to other planets someday?" Jake shrugged. "Maybe. My mom says science can do amazing things if people work hard enough." Amy got up and walked around the room. She opened Jake's closet door and looked inside. The wardrobe was big and deep, with clothes hanging on both sides. There was enough space for a person to hide in the back. "Hey," Amy said, her eyes lighting up with mischief. "Want to play hide and seek like we used to when we were kids?" "We're too old for that," Jake said, but he was smiling. "Come on, just one game." For old time's sake, Jake thought about it. They used to play hide and seek all the time when they were younger. Amy was really good at finding hiding places. "Okay, but just one game. You hide first. I'll count to 50. Amy clapped her hands together. "Perfect. No peeking." Jake closed his eyes and started counting. 1, 2, 3. Amy looked around the room quickly. She could hide under the bed, but that was too easy. She could hide behind the door, but Jake would find her right away. Then she looked at the wardrobe again. It was perfect. She could hide way in the back behind all the clothes. Amy opened the wardrobe door wider and stepped inside. She pushed past Jake's shirts and jackets until she was all the way in the back. The wardrobe was deeper than she thought. She crouched down and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a tiny crack so she could breathe. 25, 26, 27. Jake continued counting. Down in the basement, Dr. Miller was working on her most important experiment. She had been trying to create a field that could slow down time in a small area. The government wanted to use this technology to help doctors save lives. If they could slow down time around a patient, doctors would have more time to perform difficult operations. But something was going wrong with the experiment. The machines were making louder sounds than usual. Numbers on her computer screen were turning red. Dr. Miller tried to fix the problem, but the energy readings kept getting higher and higher. 48, 49, 50. "Ready or not, here I come," Jake called out. He opened his eyes and started looking around his room. Amy was good at hiding, but Jake knew all her favorite spots. He looked under his bed first. Nothing there. He checked behind his door. Empty. He looked behind his desk and in the corner by his bookshelf. Down in the basement, alarms started beeping. Dr. Miller's experiment was out of control.
Energy was building up in ways she had never seen before.
She tried to shut down the machines, but they wouldn't respond to her commands. Jake walked over to his wardrobe. This was one of Amy's favorite hiding places when they were kids. He opened the door and looked inside, pushing aside his clothes. "Amy," he called. "I know you're in here somewhere." But Amy wasn't there. At least Jake couldn't see her. He pushed all his clothes to one side and looked in every corner of the wardrobe. It was empty. In the basement, something went very wrong. Dr. Miller's machines made a loud noise like thunder. All the lights in the house went out for a second. Then they came back on, flickering and dim. Jake felt strange for a moment, like the air around him was thick and heavy. But the feeling passed quickly. He closed the wardrobe door and looked around his room again. "Amy, this isn't funny anymore," he called. "Where are you?" He looked everywhere again. Under the bed, behind the door, in the closet, behind his desk. Amy was nowhere to be found. Jake went to his window and looked outside. Maybe she had climbed out while he was counting and gone back to her house. But Amy's house looked empty. Her parents' car wasn't in the driveway. They must still be at work. Jake went downstairs. "Mom, did you see Amy leave?" Dr. Miller came up from the basement. She looked worried and upset. Her hair was messy and her hands were shaking a little. "What do you mean? I thought she was upstairs with you." "She was, but now I can't find her. We were playing hide and seek and she just disappeared." Dr. Miller frowned. "Did you check everywhere?" "Yes, everywhere. She's just gone." Jake's mother walked to the front door and looked outside. Amy's bicycle was still lying on the front lawn where she had left it. If Amy had gone home, she would have taken her bike. "This is strange," Dr. Miller said. "Are you sure she didn't say anything about leaving?" Jake shook his head. "She was hiding in my room and then she was just gone." Dr. Miller felt a cold fear in her stomach. Her experiment had gone wrong just a few minutes ago. The timing was too close to be a coincidence. But she couldn't tell Jake about her work. It was top secret. "Maybe she went home through the backyard," Dr. Miller suggested. "You should call her house and see if she's there." Jake called Amy's house, but no one answered. He tried her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He left a message asking her to call him back. Hours passed. Amy's parents came home and found her bicycle on Jake's front lawn. They came over to ask where their daughter was. Jake told them about the hide-and-seek game and how Amy had just disappeared. Amy's parents called the police. Officers came to search Jake's house and the neighborhood. They found no trace of Amy anywhere. It was like she had vanished into thin air. That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. His best friend was missing and no one knew where she was. The police had asked him the same questions over and over again. When did he last see Amy? What had she said? Was she upset about anything? Jake had answered all their questions, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. Amy had been in his wardrobe. He was sure of that. But when he looked for her, she was gone. In the basement, Dr. Miller stared at her broken machines. Her experiment had created some kind of energy field, but she didn't know what it had done. The timing of Amy's disappearance worried her more than anything else in the world. 20 years had passed since Amy Carter disappeared from Jake Miller's bedroom. Jake was now 36 years old, married to a woman named Kate Brooks, and worked as an electrical engineer. But he had never stopped thinking about Amy. Jake and Kate lived in a small house across town from where Jake grew up. Their house had a spare bedroom that Jake used as an office. The walls were covered with papers, photos, and newspaper clippings about missing persons cases. In the center of it all was a large board with everything Jake knew about Amy's disappearance. Kate understood why Jake needed to keep looking for Amy. She had heard the story many times. A 15-year-old girl doesn't just vanish from a locked room. Something had happened that day, something that the police never figured out. "You got another email," Kate said, bringing Jake a cup of coffee. She pointed to his computer screen. Jake read the email. It was from a man named Dr. Alan Price. He worked for the government and studied strange disappearances. He had found Jake's name on a website about unsolved missing person cases. The email said, "Mr. Miller, I've been reading about Amy Carter's disappearance. I work on cases like this for the government. There have been similar disappearances around the world. People vanish from closed spaces and are never found. I would like to talk to you." Jake stared at the email for a long time. Over the years, many people had contacted him about Amy. Most of them were crazy or just wanted attention. But this man worked for the government. Maybe he knew something real. Jake wrote back, Dr. Price, I'm interested in talking to you. Can we meet in person? Dr. Price replied quickly. He lived only 2 hours away and could come to Jake's house that weekend. On Saturday morning, Dr. Price arrived at Jake's house. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He carried a briefcase and looked like he had important things to say. Thank you for meeting with me, Dr. Price said as they sat in Jake's office. He looked at all the papers and photos on the walls. You've done a lot of research over the years. Jake nodded. Amy was my best friend. I never stopped believing that I could find her. Dr. Price opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. What I'm about to tell you is not public information. The government has been tracking disappearances like Amy's for many years. We call them temporal displacement events. Temporal displacement? Jake asked. What does that mean? It means people who get stuck in time. They don't die, and they don't really disappear. They get trapped in places where time moves differently. Jake felt his heart beating faster. Are you saying Amy might still be alive? It's possible. But first I need to know more about what happened that day. Tell me everything you remember. Jake told Dr. Price the whole story again. He had told it so many times over the years that he knew every detail by heart. Amy hiding in the wardrobe, the counting game, the strange feeling when the lights flickered finding the wardrobe empty. Dr. Price took notes while Jake talked. When Jake finished, Dr. Price was quiet for a long time. Your mother was Dr. Lisa Miller, correct? She worked on government projects? Yes, but she died 5 years ago. She never told me much about her work. Dr. Miller was part of a secret project. She was trying to create fields that could slow down time. The project was called Chronos Shield. Jake felt cold all over. What kind of fields? Fields that could make time move slower in small areas. The government wanted to use this technology to help save lives. If doctors could slow down time around a patient, they would have more time to do difficult operations. Jake thought about his mother working in the basement all those years ago. The strange sounds, the flickering lights, the way she looked worried and tired all the time. Do you think my mother's experiment had something to do with Amy's disappearance? Dr. Price nodded. I think Amy got caught in one of your mother's time fields. She's probably still in your old house in that wardrobe. But time is moving so slowly for her that 20 years feel like a few hours. The idea was too big for Jake to understand at first. Amy could still be 15 years old, still hiding in his wardrobe, still waiting for him to find her. If that's true, then we have to help her, Jake said. It's not that simple. The government shut down the Chronos Shield project because it was too dangerous. If Amy is really trapped in a time field, trying to get her out could kill her. Jake stood up and walked to his window. Outside, Kate was working in their garden. She looked happy and peaceful. But Jake felt like his whole world was turning upside down. Dr. Price, why are you telling me this? If it's secret government information, why are you here? Dr. Price closed his folder. Because there have been more disappearances. In the last 5 years, 12 people have vanished the same way Amy did. All of them disappeared from enclosed spaces. All of them were near places where the government did secret time experiments. You think the experiments are still happening? I think some of the old equipment is still running. Time fields don't just turn off by themselves. They can last for decades if nobody shuts them down properly. Jake felt excited and scared at the same time. My old house. My mother's basement lab. Is the equipment still there? That's what I need to find out. But I can't do it alone. The government doesn't want people to know about these experiments. If I investigate officially, they'll stop me. Jake understood. You need my help because it's my family's house. I have a right to be there. Exactly. Are you willing to take that risk? If Amy is really trapped in a time field, we might be able to save her. But if we're wrong, or if something goes wrong, we could both end up trapped too. Jake didn't need to think about it. He had been looking for Amy for 20 years. If there was even a small chance she was still alive, he had to try to save her. I'll do it, Jake said. When do we start? We'll need special equipment to detect time fields. I have some, but we'll need more. There's a man named Professor Ben Clark who used to work with your mother. He might help us. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Dr. Price planned their investigation. They contacted Professor Clark, who was now retired but still remembered the Chronos Shield project. He agreed to help them, even though it could get him in trouble with the government. Jake also talked to Detective Roy Chen, who had worked on Amy's missing person case 20 years ago. Detective Chen was retired now, but he still remembered Amy's disappearance. It had bothered him for his entire career. I always knew there was something strange about that case, Detective Chen told Jake. A girl doesn't just vanish from a locked room, but we never found any evidence of what really happened. Jake's old house was still in his family. His father, Danny, had moved to Florida after Jake's mother died, but Jake still had the keys. The house had been empty for 5 years. On a cold Saturday morning in November, Jake, Dr. Price, and Professor Clark met at the old house. Jake felt strange walking through the rooms where he had grown up. Everything looked smaller than he remembered. They went down to the basement first. Dr. Miller's lab was still there, covered in dust and spider webs. Most of the machines were turned off, but some of them had small lights that were still blinking. Professor Clark examined the equipment carefully. Lisa was always brilliant, but she took too many risks. This setup could have created a stable time field if something went wrong. Dr. Price used his detection equipment to scan the basement. I'm getting some readings here, but they're weak. The main source of temporal energy is somewhere else in the house. They went upstairs to Jake's old bedroom. Jake opened the door and felt like he was 16 again. His bed was still there, and his old posters were still on the walls. The wardrobe stood in the same corner where it had always been. Dr. Price pointed his scanner at the wardrobe. The machine started beeping loudly. There, he said. There's definitely a time field centered on that wardrobe. It's weak, but it's stable. It's been running for 20 years. Professor Clark looked worried. If Amy is in there, the field is probably breaking down after all this time. We might not have much time to get her out safely. Jake walked toward the wardrobe. His hand was shaking as he reached for the door handle. Wait, Dr. Price said. If you open that door, you could get pulled into the time field too. We need to be more careful. But Jake had waited 20 years to find Amy. He wasn't going to wait any longer. Jake's hand stopped just before touching the wardrobe door handle. Dr. Price grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Jake, listen to me, Dr. Price said. If you touch that door wrong, you could disappear just like Amy did. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with first. Professor Clark was looking at his own scanning equipment. The old man's face was pale and worried. The time field around this wardrobe is much stronger than anything we created during the Chrono Shield project. Lisa must have been running her equipment at dangerous levels when the accident happened. Jake stepped back from the wardrobe, but he couldn't stop staring at it. Amy could be inside right now, still 15 years old, still waiting for him to find her in their game of hide-and-seek. How do we get her out? Jake asked. Very carefully, Professor Clark said. The field has been stable for 20 years, but it won't last forever. Eventually it will collapse on its own. When that happens, Amy will either return to normal time or what? Jake demanded. Professor Clark looked away. Or the shock of 20 years catching up to her all at once could kill her. Dr. Price set up more equipment around the wardrobe. His machines beeped and flashed as they measured the time field. The good news is that the field is weakening slowly. We probably have a few weeks before it becomes critical. What about the bad news? Jake asked. The bad news is that we're not the only ones who know about this. The government has been tracking temporal anomalies for years. They probably detected the energy surge when we started scanning the field. As if to prove Dr. Price's point, Jake heard cars pulling up outside his old house. He looked out the window and saw 3 black cars with government license plates. Men and women in dark suits were getting out of the cars. They found us, Dr. Price said. Jake, we need to leave now. I'm not leaving Amy again, Jake said firmly. The front door of the house opened downstairs. Jake heard footsteps and voices. The government agents were already inside. A woman's voice called up the stairs. Dr. Price, we know you're here. Come down slowly with your hands visible. Dr. Price sighed. That's Agent Carol Hayes. She's in charge of cleaning up temporal messes. She won't hesitate to arrest all of us. Jake heard the agents coming up the stairs. There was nowhere to run. In a few seconds, they would be in his old bedroom, and then they would take Amy away forever. Dr. Price, Agent Hayes said as she entered the room. She was a tall woman with short black hair and cold eyes. Behind her came 4 other agents, all carrying weapons. You know you're not supposed to be investigating temporal anomalies without proper authorization. Amy Carter is not just an anomaly, Jake said angrily. She's a person. She's been trapped in there for 20 years. Agent Hayes looked at Jake like he was a bug she wanted to step on. Mr. Miller, I understand your emotional attachment to this case, but you don't understand the bigger picture. Temporal technology is a matter of national security. What national security? Jake demanded. You're talking about saving the life of a 15-year-old girl. I'm talking about preventing a disaster that could affect millions of people, Agent Hayes replied. Unstable time fields can grow larger if they're disturbed incorrectly. One mistake and this entire neighborhood could be caught in a temporal anomaly. Professor Clark stepped forward. Carol, I helped design this technology. I know how to handle it safely. Agent Hayes shook her head. Ben, you're retired. This isn't your problem anymore. We have new protocols for dealing with temporal displacement events. What kind of protocols? Dr. Price asked. The kind that prioritize the safety of the general population over the life of one individual, Agent Hayes said coldly. Jake felt sick to his stomach. You're going to let Amy die. We're going to contain the temporal anomaly before it becomes a threat to others. If the subject inside can be safely extracted, we'll try. But if extraction is too risky, we'll collapse the field in a controlled manner. Jake looked at the wardrobe where his best friend had been trapped for 20 years. He thought about Amy hiding in there as a joke, never knowing that time would forget about her. She had trusted him to find her, and he had failed her for 2 decades. I won't let you murder her, Jake said. Agent Hayes made a gesture to her men. 2 agents moved toward Jake, ready to arrest him. That's when Professor Clark did something unexpected. The old man pulled a small device out of his pocket and pressed a button. All the government scanning equipment suddenly stopped working. The lights in the house flickered just like they had 20 years ago. Ben, what did you do? Agent Hayes demanded. I activated Lisa's backup generator in the basement, Professor Clark said. All the original equipment is running again. The time field around that wardrobe just became much stronger. Dr. Price looked at his scanner. The field is expanding. Everyone needs to get away from the wardrobe. But Jake didn't move away. Instead, he stepped closer to the wardrobe. If the field was stronger now, maybe he could get inside and reach Amy. Jake, don't, Dr. Price shouted. Agent Hayes pointed her weapon at Jake. Stop right there, Mr. Miller. Jake ignored her. He reached for the wardrobe door handle again. This time he felt something strange when his fingers touched the metal. The air around him felt thick and heavy, like he was moving through water. The room around Jake started to look different. Colors became brighter, and sounds became slower and deeper. He realized that he was entering the time field. Jake, Professor Clark called, but his voice sounded far away and distorted. Jake opened the wardrobe door. Inside, behind all his old clothes from 20 years ago, he could see a figure crouched in the back corner. It was Amy, exactly as she had been on that Friday afternoon when she decided to hide as a joke. Amy looked up at Jake with surprise. From her point of view, Jake had only been counting to 50 a few minutes ago. She didn't know that 20 years had passed in the outside world. Jake, Amy said, did you find me already? I thought I had a really good hiding place. Jake felt tears in his eyes. Amy looked exactly the same. She was still 15, still wearing her blue jeans and red t-shirt, still smiling at him like they were just 2 kids playing a game. But Jake was 36 now. He had gray hair starting to show at his temples and lines around his eyes. He was married to Kate, and he had spent half his life looking for Amy. Amy, Jake said. Something went wrong. You've been trapped in here for a long time. Amy frowned. What do you mean? I just hid in here a few minutes ago. Jake could hear shouting from outside the time field, but the voices sounded slow and strange. Agent Hayes and her men were probably trying to figure out how to get him out of the field without making things worse. Amy, I need you to trust me, Jake said. We have to get out of this wardrobe right now. There are people here who want to help us, but there are also people who might hurt us. Amy looked confused, but she trusted Jake. She had always trusted him. She crawled out of her hiding place and took Jake's hand. The moment Amy touched Jake, he felt the time field change. It became unstable, fluctuating between normal time and the slowed time where Amy had been trapped. Through the wardrobe door, Jake could see Agent Hayes and her men moving in normal speed again. The time field was collapsing, but it was happening too fast. Both Jake and Amy were caught between 2 different time streams. Hold on to me, Jake told Amy. Whatever happens, don't let go. The wardrobe around them started to shake. The time field was breaking down completely, and Jake didn't know if they would survive the transition back to normal time. Professor Clark appeared at the wardrobe door. Jake, Amy, you need to move toward me slowly. Don't make any sudden movements. Agent Hayes was shouting orders to her men, but Jake couldn't understand what she was saying. All his attention was focused on getting Amy out of the collapsing time field. Amy was starting to understand that something was seriously wrong. She could see that Jake looked older, and she could hear people talking about time fields and temporal anomalies. "Jake, what happened to me?" Amy asked, fear creeping into her voice. "I'll explain everything later," Jake promised. "Right now, we just need to get out of here." They stepped out of the wardrobe together, still holding hands. The moment they crossed the threshold, time snapped back to normal. The sudden change made them both dizzy and sick. Amy looked around Jake's old bedroom and saw all the government agents with their weapons and equipment. She saw Dr. Price and Professor Clark with their scanning devices. She realized that this wasn't a game anymore. "Jake," Amy whispered. "How long was I really in there?" Jake squeezed her hand gently. 20 years, Amy. You've been missing for 20 years. Amy stared at Jake in shock. 20 years. The number was too big for her to understand. In her mind, she had just been playing hide-and-seek a few minutes ago. Now Jake was telling her that she was supposed to be 35 years old. "That's impossible," Amy said. "I can't have been gone for 20 years. Look at me. I'm still 15. Agent Hayes stepped forward. "Miss Carter, you've been caught in what we call a temporal displacement field. Time moved differently for you than it did for everyone else." Amy looked around the room at all the strangers with their weapons and machines. These people looked serious and dangerous. She moved closer to Jake, the only person she recognized. "I want to go home," Amy said quietly. "I want to see my parents." Agent Hayes and Jake exchanged a look. Jake's expression was sad, and Amy knew immediately that something was wrong. "Amy," Jake said gently, "your parents, they're gone. They died in a car accident 8 years ago. They spent 12 years looking for you before that happened." Amy felt like the world was spinning around her. Her parents were dead. She had been trapped in a time bubble for 20 years. Everyone she knew was either dead or had grown old while she stayed the same age. "This isn't real," Amy said, starting to cry. "This is just a bad dream. I'm going to wake up and everything will be normal again." Dr. Price knelt down next to Amy. "I know this is hard to understand, but we're going to help you. There are other people who have gone through the same thing you have. You're not alone." Agent Hayes was talking into her radio. "Base, this is Hayes. We have successfully extracted the temporal displacement subject, requesting immediate medical and psychological support." Jake heard the word extracted and didn't like it. It sounded like Amy was just an object to these people, not a person who had been through something terrible. "She's not going anywhere with you," Jake said to Agent Hayes. "Mr. Miller, Miss Carter needs medical attention and psychological evaluation. She's been displaced in time for 20 years. We don't know what effects that might have had on her." "The effects it's had on her are that she lost her parents and 20 years of her life," Jake said angrily. "She doesn't need to be locked up in some government facility." Professor Clark was examining the wardrobe with his scanning equipment. "The temporal field has completely collapsed. The area is now safe." Agent Hayes looked relieved. "Good. We can seal this room and make sure no one else gets hurt." But Jake wasn't thinking about sealing the room. He was thinking about getting Amy away from these government agents. They saw her as a problem to be solved, not as a person who needed help and understanding. "Amy," Jake said quietly, "do you trust me?" Amy nodded. She had always trusted Jake, even when they were kids. He had never let her down before. "Then we need to leave. Right now." Jake took Amy's hand and started walking toward the bedroom door. Agent Hayes stepped in front of them. "I can't let you leave with her. Mr. Miller, Miss Carter is a matter of national security now. She's a 15-year-old girl who needs help. Not a weapon," Jake said. "She's been exposed to temporal fields for 20 years. We don't know what that exposure might have done to her. She could be dangerous." Amy looked up at Agent Hayes with tears in her eyes. "I'm not dangerous. I just want to understand what happened to me." Dr. Price stepped between Jake and Agent Hayes. "Carol, let me take them to a safe location. I'll monitor Amy's condition and make sure she's not a threat to anyone." Agent Hayes shook her head. "That's not how this works, Alan. Temporal displacement subjects go to the secure facility for evaluation. No exceptions." That's when Professor Clark spoke up. "Actually, Carol, there is an exception. The Temporal Research Ethics Act of 2019. Agent Hayes frowned. "What act? I've never heard of any such thing." Professor Clark smiled slightly. "That's because it was classified until last month. Congress passed it after several temporal displacement subjects died in government custody. Any person who has been temporally displaced has the right to choose their own medical care and living arrangements, as long as they're not an immediate threat to public safety. Jake didn't know if Professor Clark was telling the truth or making it up, but it sounded convincing. Agent Hayes looked uncertain for the first time since she had arrived. "I'll need to verify that information," Agent Hayes said. "While you're verifying it, Amy and I are leaving," Jake said. He and Amy walked past Agent Hayes and headed for the stairs. Agent Hayes called after them. "Mr. Miller, if you leave with her, you'll both be considered fugitives." Jake stopped at the top of the stairs and turned around. "Then I guess we'll be fugitives. But Amy isn't going to be locked up like a lab rat." Jake and Amy left the house quickly. Jake's car was parked down the street away from all the government vehicles. They got in and drove away before Agent Hayes could stop them. As they drove, Amy stared out the window at the world that had changed while she was trapped in time. The cars looked different. The buildings were different. Even the clothes people wore looked strange to her. "Jake," Amy said, "you said you got married." Jake nodded. "Her name is Kate. She's a teacher. She's been very understanding about me looking for you all these years." Amy felt jealous and sad at the same time. Jake had grown up and found someone to love while she was stuck in time. She had missed everything. "Do you still live in the same town?" Amy asked. "Yes, but not in the same house. Kate and I have a small place across town. You can stay with us until we figure out what to do next." Amy was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Jake, what if Agent Hayes was right? What if I am dangerous? What if being in that time field changed me somehow?" Jake looked at Amy through the rearview mirror. She looked exactly the same as she had 20 years ago, but there was something different in her eyes. She looked older somehow, even though her body hadn't aged. "Amy, you're not dangerous. You're my best friend. That's never going to change." But even as Jake said the words, he wondered if they were true. Amy had been exposed to temporal fields for 20 years. No one knew what that might have done to her mind or her body. They drove to Jake's house where Kate was waiting. Jake had called her from the road to explain what had happened. Kate was shocked to learn that Amy was alive and still 15 years old, but she agreed to help however she could. When they arrived at the house, Kate met them at the door. She was a kind woman with brown hair and gentle eyes. She looked at Amy with sympathy and understanding. "Amy," Kate said, "I've heard so much about you over the years. Jake never stopped believing that you were still out there somewhere." Amy felt strange meeting Jake's wife. Kate seemed nice, but Amy couldn't help feeling like an outsider in Jake's new life. "Thank you for letting me stay here," Amy said politely. Kate showed Amy to the spare bedroom that Jake had been using as his office. Kate had quickly moved all of Jake's research about missing persons cases to make room for Amy. "I know this is all very overwhelming," Kate said. "If you need anything, just ask. We want to help you adjust to everything that's changed." That night, Amy lay in the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the wall, she could hear Jake and Kate talking quietly in their bedroom. She couldn't hear the words, but she could tell they were worried about her. Amy felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Everyone she had known was either dead or had moved on without her. The world had changed in ways she didn't understand. Technology was different. Politics were different. Even the music on the radio sounded strange to her. But worst of all, Amy was starting to realize that something had changed inside her too. While she was trapped in the time field, she had experienced things that she couldn't explain. She had seen glimpses of other times and places, as if the temporal field had connected her to different moments in history. Amy was beginning to understand that she might be more than just a girl who had been displaced in time. The temporal field might have given her abilities that no one else had. And if Agent Hayes found out about those abilities, Amy knew that the government would never let her go free. Amy closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but she kept seeing images of other times and places. She saw the past and the future mixed together in confusing patterns. She saw other people who had been caught in temporal fields, and she could somehow sense where they were, and when they were trapped. Amy realized that she wasn't just a victim of temporal displacement. She might be the key to helping other people who were trapped in time, just like she had been. But first, she had to learn how to control the strange new abilities that the time field had given her. 3 months had passed since Amy was rescued from the time field. She was slowly learning to live in a world that had changed without her. Jake and Kate had been patient and kind. helping her understand everything from new technology to changes in society. Amy was sitting in Jake's backyard, reading a book about the history she had missed while she was trapped in time. The book talked about wars, scientific discoveries, and social changes that had happened during her 20 missing years. It felt like reading about a different planet. Jake came out of the house carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He sat down in the chair next to Amy and handed her a glass. "How are you feeling today?" Jake asked. Amy had learned that this was a complicated question. Some days she felt almost normal. Other days she felt like she didn't belong anywhere. Today was somewhere in between. "Better," Amy said. "The dreams are getting easier to handle." The dreams were one of the strange things that had happened to Amy after her rescue. Every night she dreamed about other people who were trapped in time fields around the world. She could see them clearly, and she somehow knew exactly where they were and how long they had been trapped. Dr. Price visited them regularly to check on Amy's condition. He was fascinated by her dreams and had started keeping a record of the people and places she described. He believed that Amy's long exposure to the time field had given her the ability to sense other temporal anomalies. "Dr. Price called this morning," Jake said. "He thinks he found another person based on your dreams, a woman in Germany who disappeared from her apartment 15 years ago." Amy nodded. This was the 3rd person they had found using her dreams. Each time Dr. Price worked with local authorities to investigate the location Amy described. Each time they found evidence of temporal fields and missing people. "Are they going to try to rescue her?" Amy asked. Dr. Price is working with a team of scientists who specialize in temporal rescue operations. They're being very careful to avoid making the same mistakes the government made in the past. Amy was glad to hear that other people might be saved, but she also felt guilty that it had taken her rescue to make people care about temporal displacement victims. The front door of the house opened, and Kate came out carrying the phone. "Amy, there's someone who wants to talk to you." Amy took the phone. "Hello? Miss Carter, this is Dr. Maria Santos. I'm a scientist who studies temporal displacement. I work with Dr. Price." Amy had heard of Dr. Santos. She was one of the few scientists who had quit government work because she disagreed with how temporal displacement victims were treated. "Hi, Dr. Santos," Amy said. "Amy, I'm calling because we've had a breakthrough. Based on your descriptions of the temporal fields you experienced, we've developed a new way to rescue people who are trapped in time. We could potentially save dozens of people." Amy felt excited and nervous at the same time. "What do you need me to do?" "We need you to help us locate more temporal displacement victims. Your ability to sense time fields is unique. Without your help, we might never find these people." Amy looked at Jake, who was listening to the conversation. He nodded encouragingly. "I'll help however I can," Amy said. Over the next few weeks, Amy worked with Dr. Santos and Dr. Price to locate temporal displacement victims around the world. Amy would describe her dreams in detail, and the scientists would use that information to find the trapped people. It wasn't easy work. Amy had to relive the fear and confusion she had felt while trapped in the time field. But she knew that other people were going through the same things she had experienced, and she was the only person who could help them. The rescue operations were successful. Using new techniques developed by Dr. Santos and Professor Clark, they were able to safely extract people from temporal fields without causing them harm. Each rescued person was given the choice of where to go and how to live their new life. Amy also started working with a psychologist named Dr. Robert Kim, who specialized in helping temporal displacement victims. Dr. Kim helped Amy process the trauma of losing 20 years of her life and everyone she had known as a child. "It's normal to feel angry about what happened to you," Dr. Kim told Amy during one of their sessions. "You lost your parents, your childhood friends, and your chance to grow up normally. Those are real losses that you need to grieve." Amy appreciated Dr. Kim's honesty. Many people tried to tell her that she was lucky to still be young, or that she should be grateful to be alive. Dr. Kim understood that being displaced in time was a traumatic experience, even if Amy had survived it. One day, Jake came home from work with exciting news. "Amy, do you remember Senator Linda Foster? She's the one who's been investigating government cover-ups of temporal experiments." Amy nodded. Senator Foster had been asking questions about the Kronos Shield project and other secret temporal research programs. "She wants to meet with you," Jake said. "She's working on a law that would protect temporal displacement victims and make sure that rescue operations are handled properly." Amy met with Senator Foster the following week. The senator was a strong woman who had been fighting for government transparency for many years. Amy, Senator Foster said, "Your story has helped expose decades of secret experiments that put innocent people at risk. Because of what happened to you, we're going to make sure that temporal research is done safely and ethically." Senator Foster's law, called the Temporal Displacement Protection Act, was passed 6 months later. The law required that all temporal research be done with proper safety measures, and it guaranteed rights for people who were displaced in time. Amy testified before Congress about her experience. She told lawmakers about the 20 years she lost, the trauma of losing her parents, and the importance of treating temporal displacement victims as human beings rather than security threats. Time displacement isn't just a scientific problem, Amy told the Congressional Committee. It's a human problem. The people who get trapped in time fields are real people with families and friends who love them. They deserve to be rescued and treated with dignity. Amy's testimony helped convince Congress to fund a new organization called the Temporal Research Foundation. This civilian group would be responsible for finding and rescuing temporal displacement victims, as well as researching temporal technology for helpful purposes. Dr. Price was chosen to lead the Temporal Research Foundation. Dr. Santos became the head of rescue operations, and Professor Clark served as a senior advisor. Amy became the Foundation's first temporal sensitivity specialist, using her unique abilities to locate people who were trapped in time. On the first anniversary of her rescue, Amy stood in Jake's old bedroom, looking at the wardrobe where she had been trapped for 20 years. The room had been converted into a research center for the Temporal Research Foundation. Jake stood beside her, along with Kate and many of the scientists who had helped rescue other temporal displacement victims. "It's hard to believe it's only been a year," Amy said. "So much has changed." Jake put his arm around Amy's shoulders. "You've helped save 43 people in the past year. That's pretty amazing for someone who's still technically 15 years old." Amy smiled. She had decided to stay legally 15, even though she had lived through more experiences than most adults. The temporal field had kept her body young, and she saw no reason to change that. "I've been thinking about going back to school," Amy said. "I know it will be strange being in high school at my age, but I want to learn about all the things I missed." Kate, who was a teacher, had offered to help Amy catch up on her education. "There are programs for people in unusual situations," Kate said. "We'll find a way to make it work." Amy was also planning to write a book about her experience. She wanted other temporal displacement victims to know that they weren't alone, and that there were people who understood what they had gone through. The most important thing Amy had learned was that time might heal wounds, but it didn't erase them. She would always carry the sadness of losing her parents and missing 20 years of her life. But she had also learned that trauma could be transformed into purpose. Every person Amy helped rescue was a victory against the forces that had tried to treat temporal displacement victims as disposable. Every law that protected people like her was a step toward a better future. Amy looked around the room at all the people who had become her new family. Jake was still her best friend, even though they were both very different from the teenagers who had played hide-and-seek 20 years ago. Kate had become like an older sister to her. Dr. Price, Dr. Santos, and Professor Clark were mentors who believed in her abilities. "You know what's funny?" Amy said to Jake. "When I was hiding in that wardrobe, I thought the worst thing that could happen was that you would find me too quickly, and the game would be over." Jake laughed. Instead, the game lasted 20 years, and it turned into something much more important than we ever imagined. Amy nodded. It stopped being a game and became a mission. We're not just hiding and seeking anymore. We're finding people who are lost and bringing them home. Outside the window, Amy could see the future stretching ahead of her. She was still 15 years old in a world that had moved on without her, but she had found a purpose that made sense of her strange situation. The temporal field had taken 20 years from her life, but it had also